Okay, so straight into those pesky ideas. If there's one question I get asked more than anything else as a writer, it's this one. Where do you get your ideas from? And it's not always an easy question to answer, but sometimes it is. So I'm going to give you an example of one where I do know exactly where the idea came from. So this is The Haunted. It's my third novel, and it's a horror story, a psychological horror story that was inspired by my honeymoon. So we're still together, but what happened was we went to Scotland for our honeymoon. It was the middle of winter. That's the kind of crazy people that we are. And we headed out to a bothy, which is kind of a crofter's hut, an old shepherd's hut where you can camp. But we couldn't get there because it was all flooded and there was no way through. But it did make me think, what if a couple got there? What if they got trapped there and they couldn't get out? And it revealed all the cracks in their relationship. And so that story was very instantly inspired by what had happened to us and our experience. So it's not always that simple. Sometimes we have to search a little bit harder and try a little bit harder to get inspiration. Here's some of the things that have worked for me. So I've looked in these kinds of places to get inspiration for my books. So I've looked in my life, which is one of the things I've just described. And a couple of my ideas have come from things that I've experienced or people that I've known or things that I've seen. And certainly little incidences in the books often do, even if the whole story doesn't come from that. The world around you, it might be that you witness a conversation or notice somebody like Patricia Highsmith noticed a young man walking down to the beach, and she noticed he looked uneasy and thoughtful, and that person became the model for Tom Ripley, one of her most famous anti-heroes. So there's all sorts of places you might see something that sparks inspiration. You might look at the news. Newspaper articles can be really useful. If you think about Emma Donoghue's Room, if you've read that, well, then that was inspired by the Fritzl story, the story of the family being locked in the cellar for many, many years. So there's lots of places that you can find real-world stories that change. You want to change them, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a later lecture. But they can be really good starting points for the kind of stories you might want to write. You can also use writing prompts, and again I'll go into a bit more detail, but a writing prompt gets you writing. And my experience is that really where the ideas come from for novels and stories is actually the writing. Before I started writing, I didn't have any ideas. I was like, I want to write, but what can I write about? When I actually started putting things down on paper, just writing scenes, descriptions, following exercises, I found more and more that actually the ideas were flowing, and suddenly I did know what I wanted to write about. So it's one of those circular things where I think you actually have to start writing and then the ideas will come.